Bob Lazar is back. Not because the case was solved. Not because the government opened a vault and handed over a flying saucer. But because in 2026, the same story walked back onto Joe Rogan, onto Amazon, and straight into the middle of the UFO disclosure fight. And that is what makes this moment interesting. For decades, Bob Lazar has been one of the most divisive names in UFO history. To believers, he is the man who told the public what was really happening in the Nevada desert. To skeptics, he is a warning about how a good story can outlive its evidence. But in 2026, the question is not simply, do you believe Bob Lazar? The better question is, why is this story still alive? Why does it keep returning? And what does it mean that a claim once treated like fringe late-night radio now sits inside a world of UAP hearings, official secrecy debates, whistleblower claims, streaming documentaries, and politicians asking for UFO files? To understand why Lazar is back, we have to go back to where the story became public. In 1989, Lazar appeared in reports with Las Vegas journalist George Knapp. He claimed that he had worked at a secret facility called S4 near Area 51, where his job was connected to reverse engineering advanced craft that were not made on Earth. The details were cinematic, but oddly technical. He described a hidden desert facility, hangar doors built into a hillside, a craft he called the Sport Model, a propulsion system that supposedly did not work like a jet, a rocket, or anything else in ordinary aerospace engineering. And he described an element with atomic number 115, which he said was connected to the craft's power source. This is the part of the story that became almost impossible to separate from modern Area 51 mythology. Before Lazar, Area 51 was secret, but it was not the global symbol it later became. After Lazar, the image hardened in public imagination. Restricted desert roads, hidden aircraft, black projects, recovered craft, and a government that would never admit what it had. The problem is that a powerful cultural effect is not the same thing as proof. And Lazar's case has always lived inside that gap. On one side, there are details that made people stop and listen. His account has been unusually stable over time. He was connected, at least in some way, to the Los Alamos world before he became famous. He described a secret aerospace environment at a time when many of its real-world logistics were not public knowledge. And he went public with a story that, if false, became an incredibly difficult thing to carry for nearly 4 decades. On the other side, the objections are serious. His claimed academic background at MIT and Caltech has never been verified in the normal way. Skeptics have pointed to missing professors, missing classmates, and records that do not line up cleanly with the biography Lazar gave. His central claim, that he worked on non-human craft at S4, has not been proved, and the existence of Area 51 does not prove the existence of S4. A real secret base does not automatically make every story about that base true. That is why Lazar is so difficult to cover responsibly. If you dismiss him too quickly, you miss why the story has power. If you accept him too quickly, you skip over the hard evidence problem. So, what changed in 2026? First, the packaging changed. The new documentary, S4, The Bob Lazar Story, brought Lazar's account back with polished recreations, a fresh media cycle, and the force of a streaming-era release. Whether someone believes the documentary or not, it gave the old story a new surface. It turned memories, diagrams, desert roads, and disputed claims into something people could watch and argue about again. Then came the podcast cycle. Lazar's 2019 Joe Rogan appearance was already one of the major reasons a new generation discovered him. In April 2026, he returned with the director of the new film. That matters because in the modern UFO world, a podcast appearance is not just an interview, it is a distribution event. Clips travel. Reactions travel. Skeptics make breakdowns. Believers make response videos. The story starts moving again. But the biggest change is not the documentary. It is the world around the documentary. The public conversation about UFOs is not where it was in 1989. The language has changed. We say UAP now. Military pilots have spoken publicly about strange encounters. Congress has held hearings. Officials argue over what can be released. Presidents and lawmakers talk about UFO files in daylight instead of leaving the subject entirely to tabloids and fringe radio. None of that proves Lazar, but it changes the room he walks back into. In the old room, the whole subject could be laughed away before the details were even discussed. In the new room, the government itself admits there are things in the sky that remain unidentified. That does not mean aliens. It does not mean reverse engineering. It does not mean S4. But it does mean the old reflexive answer, "This is all nonsense," has become harder to use as a complete explanation. That is why Lazar is back. Not because his evidence suddenly became complete, because the world became more willing to ask the kind of questions his story has always depended on. And the most famous of those questions is element 115. When Lazar first talked about it, element 115 was not part of everyday public science. Today, it exists. It is called moscovium. Scientists have created it. It sits on the periodic table. For Lazar supporters, this is one of the great wait-a-minute details. He talked about 115 before it was officially discovered. Doesn't that count for something? It counts as interesting. It does not count as confirmation. The element that scientists created decays extremely quickly. It is not a stable fuel source. It has not been shown to bend gravity, power a craft, or do anything like what Lazar described. The fair version is this. The number became real chemistry. Lazar's specific claim did not become confirmed physics, and this is the pattern of the whole case. There are details that keep the door from closing, but there is no single piece that blows the door open. That is why believers and skeptics keep talking past each other. Believers often see a pattern. Area 51 later acknowledged UAP secrecy, now mainstream, military witnesses speaking out, reverse engineering allegations entering congressional language, element 115 becoming a real element, Lazar telling the same story for decades. Skeptics see a different pattern. No verified S4 employment record, no verified MIT or Caltech degree, no recovered sample, no public craft, no scientific proof of the propulsion claim, and a story that becomes more powerful in culture than it is in documentation. Both patterns matter. And that is where the real video begins. Because Bob Lazar is not only a UFO claim, he is a test of how people evaluate evidence when the subject is wrapped in secrecy. In normal life, if someone claims they work somewhere, you check the records. If the records are missing, that counts against them. But in the world Lazar is describing, missing records are part of the claim. That does not mean you believe him. It means the normal tools become less clean. If the government can keep aircraft programs secret, if contractors can operate inside classified structures, if agencies can deny and compartmentalize and hide paper trails, then absence of a record is not always simple. But absence of a record is also not evidence by itself. That is the trap. The believer says, of course there is no paper trail. They erased it. The skeptic says, there is no paper trail because it did not happen. And the public is left staring at the same empty space, trying to decide which absence means more. This is why Lazar's return is worth covering. Not because the answer is easy, because the structure of the case shows why UFO secrecy stories are so hard to kill. They live in a space where proof is demanded, but secrecy is expected. Where testimony matters, but testimony is never enough. Where a witness can seem strangely consistent and still be wrong. Where a skeptic can be correct about missing records and still fail to explain why the story keeps matching the shape of a hidden world. That is the uncomfortable part. The strongest argument for Lazar is not that every detail checks out. It is that the story has survived longer and aged stranger than many people expected. The strongest argument against Lazar is not that secret programs do not exist. They do. It is that extraordinary claims still need extraordinary support, and the central evidence has never arrived in a form the public can inspect. So, where does that leave us? Somewhere more honest than either fan culture or easy dismissal. Bob Lazar is back because the UFO conversation is back. He is back because the public is more suspicious of official silence than it was in 1989. He is back because modern UAP hearings made the phrase reverse engineering sound less like science fiction and more like a question Congress is willing to ask. He's back because streaming documentaries and podcasts can resurrect an old case overnight. And he is back because his story was never really resolved. It was only sorted into camps. Believers put him in one box. Skeptics put him in another. But the actual case sits between them, still waiting for the one thing that would change everything. Verifiable evidence of the place, the program, the craft, or the material. Until then, the honest conclusion is not that Bob Lazar was right. And it is not that Bob Lazar was definitely lying. The honest conclusion is that Bob Lazar is back because the question he raised in 1989 has never fully gone away. If the government had something that would change our understanding of reality, how would we know? Would there be a paper trail? Would there be witnesses? Would there be leaks, denials, destroyed records, strange consistencies, impossible gaps, and one man telling the same story until everyone was tired of hearing it? Maybe, maybe not. But in 2026, Bob Lazar is back. And the strangest part is that the world he described no longer feels as impossible to imagine as it once did.